The forums that matter. A community service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Cleveland. This is the first forum of the fall 2023 season, and we're opening with a new schedule. We're having forums on the first and third Sundays of the month. I'm Susan Alcorn, a member of the forum committee and the coordinator of today's forum. The title is, in our Unitarian discussions, organize these forums as a service to the community and to support individual and collective growth for all of us. Title of today's forum is Artificial Intelligence, Stunning Advances, Vital Questions, and Regulations. The artificial intelligence is already reshaping important parts of our community and our economy and our government and our personal lives. It's certainly changing our workplace, education, healthcare, transportation, and how we interact with the environment, computers, and all types of technology. In so many ways, we are witnessing an artificial intelligence revolution in our lives. I would now like to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Vipin Chaudhary is the chair of the Department of Computer and Data Sciences at Case Western Reserve University. His current research is focused on high-performance computing, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence. Dr. Chaudhary recently co-led the National Strategic Computing Initiative for the United States. That coalition included the National Artificial Intelligence Research Institute. So I would like to turn this over to Dr. Chaudhary.
Thank you, Susan. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share my screen so that people on Zoom can see it. Yeah, it does show up here. So I'm going to talk about artificial general intelligence, which is really caught up with, all the news that you hear about it. To start off, well, I want to say we've been using AI for a very long time. And we've been using it to increase our productivity. So if you look at calling up someone, customer service, and your voice recognition, press 1 for this, or you can speak that. That's been around for more than a decade. That is all artificial intelligence. Voice synthesis, generating music, medicine. For over a decade now, lots of AI has been used to diagnose mammograms, radiology, pathology, where AI actually is going to diagnose as if it is a physician. So we've been seeing this for quite a while. You remember Jeopardy, the IBM Watson system? It beat out everyone. Chess, that's been quite a while ago. All AI. But more recently, because of ChatGPT, where it is interfacing with you in a typewritten natural interface, that it's caught everyone's attention. So that is what is generative AI. But let me very briefly tell you how AI works. Right? So you have lots of input, and then you have corresponding to that input, you have the correct outcome. What you do is you have a computer program, which you call our AI model, which gets trained. And now that you have this AI model, you can give it a new input and you can get an output. So simply that's how AI systems work. So I need a lot of good input, corresponding output. So if I have lots of images of, say, lung X-rays, and I have correspondingly, hey, do you have COVID or not? I can have millions of these, and then the model is going to learn. So when you give it a new X-ray, it will tell you whether you have COVID or not, right? Works perfectly. We've been using generative AI as well for quite a while. I was saying about synthesis of text. How many of you have used Grammarly? Right? Few hands there. So when you're writing and Gmail, do people use Gmail here? Well, sometimes it tells you what to write. It fills up stuff for you. That is generative AI, right? And it does that uniquely and personalized for you when you are writing your email. It learns how you respond and then fills up things. So this has been around for a little while.
Recording in progress.
Well, let me bring this art concept, and I saw previously there was some stuff about art here. So you can mimic styles and technique. For example, this is an original picture. Well, I can have AI create something out of that, right? Now, who owns this, right? So those are some of the issues. To me, the person who asked it to do that owns it. It is a tool that you use. Long time back, we could say, well, if I'm using a computer to do whatever, to write my text, does the person own it, or the computer own it, or the company which owns the computer owns it? No, it's me who owns it. So when I take this art and make modifications or prompt, as we call now, prompt engineering, well, it is that input that I'm giving. It's how I use that system. But more on that later. Questions about the ownership of art, and same thing with music. You can go download a small app. It'll create music for you, and the music is novel. Prompt generated arts and pictures. This has existed for 3 years now. DALL-E, this is a photograph of an astronaut riding a horse. All you need is to just give that prompt and it generates this for you. People are generating all kinds of interesting art with it. Again, who owns it? Teddy bears working on new AI research in the moon. It's pretty amazing how well it does things. Right? The other way to use this is, I was showing you how AI learns. You need a lot of input and corresponding output. Now, that's very hard. So I need a lot of people to go and give me correct output. Well, what if I can generate that? I can synthesize that. So I can use AI to create synthetic data from which I will learn. Autonomous driving, right? That's how they do stuff. How many of you been to San Francisco in the last 3 months? Okay. Did you notice anything different?
It was San Francisco. There were too many things to notice.
Okay. Well, I was there, and what I noticed was cars like this, Waymo, and a lot more cruises. These are self-driven cars and as taxis. There are thousands of them in the downtown of San Francisco. And I was driving and I look, oh, there's no one driving that. Right? Works perfectly. Right? Most of the time, lot more than humans. Lot of studies done, and I think last week someone was on the air, they are several times better than humans driving. That is serious AI, right? This is quite shocking. If you can drive in San Francisco, I think the next frontier is New York City, then you can go anywhere. Questions about who is liable if you have an accident? Well, it's kind of similar. When I'm driving a car, wheel comes out, who's responsible? I am. There's a pothole, my car goes over, I damage, I take insurance, I'm liable. It's not the government who has that pothole there for whatever reason, or the car company because there was a flat tire. No, that's on me. Similarly, there are going to be a lot more intricacies and subtleties here, but who's liable for these kind of things? What about education? So I'm in the field of education. A lot of people are worried. Well, you have AI, it will do the homeworks for you. You're going to do cheating. Well, just like when calculators came up, when internet came up, people would go and look up for answers on the internet. Of course, that's cheating if you are told you're not supposed to use the internet. Right? You're given that, whether you use that or not, that's up to you. But in your exam, you're going to suffer when you're not going to be allowed the internet. Same thing with AI. It can probably solve most college problems. You give it an input and it is going to probably majority of the time, more than 90% of the time, give you right answers. Right? Just make sure if you don't want students to use it, don't use it. But it can be used as a great learning tool. So you have personalized learning tools with AI where you're given a problem, you try to come up with a solution. Based on your mistakes, it is going to figure out, hey, you are lacking this basic understanding, so let me go and teach you that. So it can be really useful in making education, one, very widely available, right? Everyone has access to, well, if you don't have access to internet and computer, that's a whole different problem, right? We don't want to go there. But if you have that, then I don't need to have a proctor. This can do all of that. Job losses is another thing that I hear about. Oh, well, it's going to take away jobs. Yes, it will take away some jobs. Any new technology that comes in does impact existing jobs and also future jobs. It will create some jobs as well, but it is going to impact some jobs. What it is impacting already, and the industry is already using AI in software engineering, programmers have become a lot more efficient. They are now, their productivity is 2 to 3x what it used to be. The AI can almost write most of your code, right? So what I could do earlier, I can do the work of 3-4 people, right? So it is going to impact, and it's going to impact white collar jobs a lot more, but it is going to generate new jobs as well. You've all heard of deep fakes, right? Deep fake is you create fake news, you create fake stuff, fake video, fake audio. Here is a list of photos here, right? There are too many of them. Can anyone spot which is fake? You can generate videos of me talking like anyone else here in their voice, and I can do that instantly. So you can imagine the impact of this in elections and so on. The videos that you encounter in your social media may not be true, but you can't tell. Here, all of these are fake pictures.
Wow.
You cannot tell whether the person is. And I'll sort of close with this. So AI, what it does differently is it can transfer knowledge from one system to the other instantly, whereas humans take years to do that and they don't transfer the same knowledge. So if I have to learn from one of you about what you are expert in, well, it'll take me a long time to talk to you, probably years to get that. And even then, I'm not going to get the same knowledge. But with AI, the model that I showed you, I just put that model in a different machine, and there you have transferred the knowledge. So whatever good and bad it does, you can replicate it very quickly.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Chaudhary. Our second speaker, Dr. Fred Nard, is the director of the Spangenberg Center for Law, Technology, and the Arts at Case Western. Previously, he was the professor of law, science, and technology at Columbia University's Law School. He's published articles in dozens of law publications and is the recent author of the 6th edition of the casebook, The Law of Patents. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about this very important topic and to listen to my colleague Vipin, which I'll no doubt learn a great deal from. In 1787, cast your mind back, in the heat of Philadelphia, a little bit louder?
Louder.
Thank you. Let me move this up a little bit. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Perfect. In 1787, in the heat of Philadelphia, James Madison of Virginia and Charles Pinckney of South Carolina, Pinckney may be better known for his role in the XYZ affair 11 years later, wrote the following constitutional clause, giving Congress the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing in authors and inventors an exclusive right for a limited time in their writings and discoveries. It's that, using the term intellectual property anachronistically, that term intellectual property didn't really come into effect until the late 19th century, but there is the American Intellectual Property Constitutional Foundation. It's an extraordinary thing that patents and copyrights were thought of that early in the Republic. And it is in that context I want to talk to you about AI. A few things about that clause: to promote the progress of science and useful arts. What does that mean, first of all? It has been interpreted to mean that property in one's ideas, in one's creation, in one's invention, is there to promote the public good, that we as society are better off by having creation, whether it is a vaccine for COVID or a fabulous work of art, whatever it may be, we are better off. And we will get more of that stuff as society if we provide an incentive for creators, authors, and inventors. But here's the key that is relevant to today's talk. What do we mean by an author and inventor? What does it take to be an author and inventor? For 200 plus years, there was a body of law that was built up over these two terms. And now with the introduction of AI, the courts and legislatures and policymakers are having to rethink who is an author, who is an inventor, as Vipin alluded to in his slides. When we say author, copyright law uniformly would say, well, as long as you are an independent creator, in other words, you did not copy your creation from someone else, you're an independent creator. So if I sit in front of the Eiffel Tower and I paint Eiffel Tower and it's representative, and I put that painting in a closet, and you subsequently sit in front of the Eiffel Tower and paint it, and it turns out to be exactly like mine, that's perfectly fine. We both have a copyright because we independently created it. So it's not about novelty. It's simply about independent creation. However, if you were peeking over my shoulder and you drew from mine, that would be a copyright infringement. You're just a copyist at that particular point. In patent law, to be an inventor, you simply had to offer a sufficient qualitative contribution to the invention. So if I invented the chair back when, and I come along and say, you know what, it'd be nice to have some legs, a support for to sit, and a back, that's an inventor. And that's my invention. If you come along and say, Nard, you know what, you should make it green. Well, you're really not an inventor at that point. You're not contributing to its utility at that point. You may be my marketing person, but you're not an inventor. Someone who contributed to the utility of the object. This was well settled, uncontroversial law. Then here comes AI. And I don't know if we have a picture of that painting. You don't have to have it. It's okay if it's going to cause too much technical problems.
I'll play while you talk.
Okay, so there is this gentleman named Stephen Thaler who is making a lot of news. He's a scientist, he's an AI guy who is pushing the boundaries of what it means to be an author, what it means to be an inventor. And he wants to change the law. He's a pioneer. There it is. So this is a recent entrance to paradise. Dr. Thaler created generative AI called Davis, but here he used AI called Midjourney, where he simply issued a prompt and said, create an artwork. And this is what AI did. And he sought to copyright this. Now, he conceded before the Copyright Office that this was purely AI generated. I just pushed a button, so to speak. But I own it because I own the AI device, but I didn't create this. Who is the author? And the Copyright Office said, we cannot offer a copyright on this because an author has to be a human being. That's where the law is. Okay, now we can see it much more clearly. The more you see that and less of me, it's a good day. It's a better day. You just need to hear me. And so the copyright, and then Dr. Thaler appealed this decision to the courts, and the courts affirmed, saying it has to be a human. But in a more nuanced part of the opinion, the court said, look, we know these are changing times, that this is a very fluid area of the law, and that we have to address the issue at some point. We have to ask the question, how much human input does there have to be before we say, okay, this person is the author? You could have an AI generated part, but just like my chair example, where you have different inputs from different people, what if AI does a little bit and the human does some as well? So in this sort of pixelated representation, what if Dr. Thaler sort of touched up around the edges? Is he now an author? We don't know the answer to this. These are some of the cutting edge legal questions. What does it mean to be an author? So far, we know you have to be a human being, and AI is not human, even though Dr. Thaler says his AI is sentient, has feelings, has emotions. Right. He tried to do the same thing in the patent space. He said his AI device invented a food container. It wasn't terribly sophisticated technology, but it was a food container and a beacon light. Went to the Patent and Trademark Office and said, this AI, my AI that I created, invented this. Patent Office said, sorry, no patent. You're not an inventor because an inventor has to be a human being. Went to the courts affirmed you have to be a human being. Nice, clean opinion, but it left so many unanswered questions. Number one, as I said before, you could envision a situation where a human being and an AI generative device collaborate on making something. What do we do with that? Right? What do we do with that? The other thing the law has not yet addressed, and Vipin talked about, is that we humans have been using technology for a very long time to create. A paintbrush is a form of technology. A typewriter is a form of technology. The difference, though, is those are just tools of creation, that there's been maximum human output and input. The human is just using it as a tool. Here, AI does a lot of the generation. The typewriter did not write the novel. The paintbrush did not create the painting. Did the AI device generate this? Well, what used to be up there? Yes. Yes, that's the argument. So now we have AI taking over more things. The thing I want to leave you with, and I'll finish with this, Susan, is by saying that authors and inventors have to be human, is it short-sighted? Remember I said this clause in the Constitution to promote the progress of science and the useful arts is meant as what philosophers will say, utilitarian clause, meaning that we want IP, intellectual property there to make society better off. Does it matter who the author and inventor is, as long as we have something, some output that makes society better off? And if you take that property right away by saying, well, it's not a human being who created this, is that going to lead to fewer creations, fewer inventions? That's the key question, it seems to me. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
All right, good book. Have a seat here
Sure.
and talk a little bit before we open it up for Q&A. That's my thought here. We have some questions for each other. That would get our question and answer period started.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to start, Vipin?
Yep. Working?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So the question about ownership with a human. So if you look at a software company, the code that they write, and I think even the picture that you showed, I have to give it some prompts. And depending on the kind of prompts I give, it's going to generate something else. I may give the same prompt twice, I'll get a different answer. So the final decision is still the human and the input.
Yeah.
So AI becomes like a tool. Why is this different?
It's a good question, and I'm not so sure I have the right answers, but what I would say is there is a line between where you have human input becomes enough qualitatively and quantitatively where we say, okay, now you are an author. And so much in the law, we draw lines all the time, and our job is to justify them. We would need to know more technically how much is enough, where that line is. So I think you're right. I think with Dr. Thaler, he wanted to make it very simple. He wanted to say, I just pushed a button. I didn't do any of the creation at all. And so he made it easy on the courts. In your example, Vipin, there's more human input. And it's our job to decide how much is enough. And I would say this, just as a follow-up, when photography was invented in the late 19th and became really prominent in the early 20th century, copyright law was very skeptical. All you're doing here is just pointing this, and you're taking a picture of reality. There's no authorship there, and it's not worthy of a copyright. It's only when we began to appreciate the human input of lighting, of angle, of optics, that we said, oh, there is. And Ansel Adams is the one who really drove this home. He was essentially a physicist when it came to optics. And my sense is that we're sort of living in that space now with AI, that we haven't fully appreciated the amount of human input. And once we do, the law will catch up to that.
And the other question I have, and this is harder. So in computer science, you try to figure out whether it's a human or a machine by what was called a Turing test. So you are in a room where you don't see who you're interacting with, but you're given this computer and you interact with someone on the other side. And you have to distinguish whether it's a human or a machine. With today's AI systems, you just cannot distinguish. So what is this concept about human creating it or machine creating it? And to take that a step further, we are getting into the age where I will probably start having, or we, devices implanted in us. So are we then human or machine? Combination, and where does this all work?
Yeah, we need our philosophy colleagues here as well for that. So let me take a small part of that excellent question. At the end, I talked about how intellectual property is really designed for us. That without these incentives, the argument goes, without the dangling of the property right carrot, there'll be fewer people incentivized to make really important stuff for us. And if we focus on that, I think you peel the complexity of that question away. You just look at the output, and we don't care how you got there, because we got something at the end that makes us better, right? Whether it is a medicine or a work of art. And I think if we focus on that and not get caught up on, is this human created, is it machine created, that maybe that's an easy way out, but it's grounded in a lot of history and a lot of law.
Okay, Thank you both so much for introducing this very important topic. We're now going to start our question and answer time here. And we're also going to pass around the clipboard. And if you want to receive notices of future forums on the first and third Sundays of the month, then sign your name and your email so that you'll be seeing that clipboard coming. So anyway, our first question, I can see some hands up already. And you have to hold your hand up, and also please keep your questions short. Thank you.
And also make sure when you're holding the microphone, make sure you're holding it right in front of your mouth.
Like this? Yeah. I want to thank both of you for a very fine presentation. Thank you. Maybe for both or either, whatever, if you could unpack for us a little bit the role that AI plays in the ongoing labor struggle between the writers and actors and the studios that's been going on for a while now, and now it is kind of high profile or sort of. Go ahead.
Okay, I can give my perspective. And then, so I think it's a losing battle for the writers, my opinion, because more and more of the creation of those kind of scripts are going to be done automatically. In fact, it is already being done automatically. A lot of the movie themes and how they are created, a lot of it is already generated by AI. So the number of people that will be required to create content is going to keep reducing. I think it's just a matter of time that number is going to get smaller.
I would agree with that. It's very disruptive, AI. The guild system of the Middle Ages did not allow innovation because it was a job securing type of mechanism. No innovation allowed because it's too disruptive. Reminds me of that a bit. But keep in mind that if AI can make you laugh harder, make you feel better when you watch a movie, does it matter who created it? Or is there a more human dimension and that people are going to be out of work and we should care about that more? And even though the movies aren't as good, the comedies aren't as funny, the paintings aren't as good. That's a hard question.
I just wanted to say, and I'm sorry, it may not matter to me, but it will matter a lot to the workers who are displaced by AI.
No doubt.
Yes.
No doubt. And you could say that in so many disciplines, and that is something that deserves serious consideration for sure.
Thank you for an outstanding presentation. I'm a photographer, and Photoshop has changed my world entirely. A journalist a while ago was fired because he erased some legs on their scoreboard to make a better picture on the sports page, and he was fired because it wasn't reality. So it seems to me that AI will be Photoshop on steroids when it comes to our understanding of what we're seeing. So how will we know in a newspaper or a television show what is real and what has been erased or manipulated?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? And I think there are a few ways you could address that. You could just have regulations and laws that require a representation of what is real and what is not, that what you're about to see, and then just explain that. And so there has to be some accountability up front. In the end, it seems to me that market forces are such that with respect to audiences, I don't know if that's going to matter. What matters is what you said, though, about Photoshop, about AI on steroids. I love that phrase, by the way. Is what's it going to do to the creative classes like yourself, who came up with photography when photography was all human input using a really important machine? What happens next for you, the next generation of photographers, right? I mean, I could do this and say, man, I could take a great photo, and I have no training. You bring much more to it. Is there a role for photographers using AI in a way that creates something even better than AI could do on its own? In other words, the human input component, what is left for you to do? And that's more of a technical photography type question than it is anything else.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
both are experts in your own field, and I appreciate hearing from you. The part that is concerning to me about AI is where is the soulfulness? And at this time in our life, with the world being what it is, I would like to hear a kind of conversation that really looks at the beauty of AI and what it can contribute. And you did state facts, but there's a way in which you're both sort of watering it down. You're not watering it down, but you're watering it down. And I would like to see us make some sense out of this and go forward.
Thank you for that.
I don't know if I totally understand your question, but I think there are a lot of negatives to how this technology can be used and is being used. I think that becomes more legal question about how you manage that situation.
We lawyers have answers for everything. So stay tuned. Vipin had a slide up about the input, right? There's a lot of input that comes up front, and that is a human thing. Right? That's the part where humans, they input. And that may be where the soulfulness is. But the problem is it's not visible, right? That at least to the spectator, the beneficiary of it. What the AI generates at the end is what we have. I don't know if there's much solace in this, but behind an AI generated representation or creation, there is a human somewhere behind the curtain that has engaged in some inputs. Is that a technically accurate?
It's no longer accurate, and I'll tell you why. So there's this concept of reinforcement learning. So AlphaGo, people heard of the game Alpha or Go, and AlphaGo was a deep mind software which beat the Go players. And the way it learned that was to play against each other. The software would create a solution and then compete with each other and improve. It didn't need any input from outside. Most of the training of autonomous vehicles is also generated synthetically. You can't create all possible scenarios by just driving around. So you insert certain scenarios. So you have a real scene, I bring a person in, I bring a dog in, and create those. So a lot of the input is done synthetically. Reinforcement learning, for example, you can have a robot learn how to play soccer absolutely automatically without any input. You give it an objective that you have to take the ball, you have to kick. And this is available on the internet. I would suggest go and just search for this and you'll find it. It's amazing over time how you keep learning, because the goal is to get better. And it will do that. So more and more the systems technically are gearing towards where you learn yourself, because the process of learning from human input is too expensive.
Is the initial input human?
The goal may be set by the human.
And then there's just a broad plane.
And then you have a framework.
Open canvas where
Correct.
they learn and adapt.
So you can create a robot which has 6 legs, for example, and it will learn how to start walking the most efficiently, running, climbing certain terrains. You don't have to give any input. And then you can say, create robots with 2 legs, 4 legs, 6 legs to figure out what is the best robot to create to do certain things.
Who gives it the ability to adapt and learn? Who creates that framework to?
Well, that's the AI
That's the initial
framework.
architect of the human. Okay. But after that, it's sort of.
Correct.
Thank you for that.
Hi, thank you for coming today. The arguments so far have seemed to remove the human and just think that the AI is creating it. Like that art that was up there, nobody in here can create it. We can't go up to an AI and say, give me that picture. The human part seems like it was intentionally removed from your cases, because that complex of a picture requires a ton of input from the person and artistic style, and there's involvement there. And then not only that, but the model that was made on the back end, they don't know how, the model doesn't know how to piece all that information together. They have to do trial and error and learn it. But why, it seems like all of the human part of it is being removed. And people are just saying like the AI is creating everything. It just seems odd that that keeps going like that.
In the legal case with Dr. Thaler, you're right. He very deliberately, as a matter of legal strategy, removed the human components. And I created this AI, then I stepped back. I pressed the button, the AI created this. And his goal in doing that is to get the legal system to recognize that an AI, a generative AI can be an author or can be an inventor. That's his goal. And so either he purposely downplayed the human, right, or there was minimal human involvement. Either way, it was a part of just a general legal strategy. Every jurisdiction except South Africa has disagreed with Dr. Thaler, but it's an ongoing story.
My question is like, who owns all this stuff? Who makes the money on it? We're in a capitalistic society, and who owns the products of these AI machines? The owner of the machines, the people who programmed it. To me, that's the confusing part about who owns.
So it's a whole ecosystem. So the biggest, it's not working.
Yes, it's working.
Oh, okay. So the biggest chip maker, NVIDIA, for example, drives a lot of the hardware on which you run or train these models. Then there are companies like Google, Facebook, and so on, who create applications which the end users use. Clearly, there is a lot of benefit because so many people are using it. So there's a whole economy. The economy is so big and it's going to increase. Look at these big companies. They're almost getting to $3 trillion, $2 trillion market cap and so on. They are the biggest companies because there is such a consumptive consumer base for all of this.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, where do the profits go? That's the problem. Is you need less workers, and the money stays at the top someplace.
So I don't know if it is less workers. It is going to change the kind of workers you have. Yeah, so I think that is debatable, but it is creating a lot of different types of jobs as well. Right.
And I would just add to Vipin's remarks that in terms of ownership, if you step outside the realm of intellectual property, it's really just a matter of contract law at that particular point. At our university, for instance, if Vipin were to come up with a fabulous invention, he would have to disclose that to Case Western Reserve as part of our employment contract. But so that is just a contract and it imposes that obligation on us. And that's true in many corporations. If an employee invents something, that employee has to give that essentially to his employer, and in compensation, there's a nice salary, there are benefits, etc. So contract law fills in those gaps and those interstices. When you see a movie, for instance, made from a book or whatever, there are so many inputs, so many things, so many people contributing. That's all handled by contract law as who owns something specifically. Then it comes just a matter of negotiation.
Vipin, Craig, thank you very much. Really great talk. So a lot of this has been discussion thus far has been talked about the human input, but I want to know where, and I think this might have been brought up in some recent studies, but what about the input from the standpoint of what trained the models to begin with? These models are trained with a huge amount of information in order to make them work. And let me give you kind of an example. If I was an artist, let's say, who had a very unique style, I was the only one doing it, I copyrighted this style. And then someone goes to DALL-E and says, please create a picture in my style, knowing that my style was the only one that could be used for this input. How would that, be utilized in laws of ownership and authorship?
Yeah, so that's a terrific question. So this is another side of AI where there's infringement suits pending now accusing AI owners of scraping the internet for all sorts of content. And that's used for input. And so that's a problem. And the argument that it's not infringement is so-called fair use, and that may be another discussion altogether. But let's just take that example for a second. Let's see, instead of a style, because ideas can't be copyrighted, if someone looks at a painting and they say, well, it's definitely you, that's your genre, but let's just look at a particular painting. Someone comes along to an AI and says, make that for me. That's a problem for whoever makes that, because you have a copyright in that representation of in your painting, and you could sue whoever created it, whether it's a human, AI, there's someone behind the AI that did the prompt, right? So that's not legally, you have a cause of action. The problem is that the sheer volume of scraping and alleged infringement activity is problematic. And what do we do with that? Do we have thousands and thousands of lawsuits? Do we need legislation for that? Is it even infringement? When Google did its, they reproduced books. Google reproduced thousands and thousands and thousands of books. They would go to research libraries around the world, and they would just scan books, a lot of which were copyrighted. Blatant reproduction. And they argued that was fair use, meaning we should be able to do this and it won't be infringing. And the Supreme Court agreed with them. And the reason they agreed with them is because they're making these books more accessible to the public. Again, back to the benefit of us. Keep in mind, though, the entire book is not made available to the public. You could just do a quick search, like, oh, I know there is this one quote in this particular book, and you type it in and it shows you what page it's on. And Google argued, we're just whetting the appetite of the public to then go buy the book, just like disc jockeys used to say back in the days of radio. We're playing these songs, you go buy the whole album. And the court agreed with that. So the analogy is not perfect, but that's part of the argument, even though there's blatant reproduction.
So there's another aspect to that. So a lot of people assume that because you have scraped this much information, you are just reproducing that information. That's not the case. So when you ask for a painting or you ask for some writer, you can, as a human, you go and look at paintings, then you can go and create your own, so long as I don't exactly do the same thing. AI does that. It does create its own rather than just show you something. When it shows you an existing information, that is more like a search, which you can go do Google search, Bing search, and so on.
But I'm sorry, that scraping, that is, and this isn't an exact reproduction, they're scraping it, and AI then would modify thereafter.
No, you scrape, that is, you're reading information.
Correct.
As a human, I can read information.
Right.
But then when you ask it for, hey, can you create me a painting?
No, for sure. But there's initial copying of the exact information that is then manipulated thereafter.
Right. So it's that copying similar to humans looking at things.
Right. So there's a difference between, in the eyes of copyright, a human looking at it and making something from it. Am I going to the Xerox machine and just photocopying it? Right.
Well, so I can delete that data and it's no longer copying. Then as a computer, I would say, I just go scan. Scraping is I scan it and I don't store it.
So I just have a quick follow-up question, this one now to you, Vipin. You know, I've done certain types of experiments where I can look at a complete microbiome and say, hey, look, there's this amount of bacteria here, this amount of bacteria, this amount of bacteria here in any one sample. Could you, or could AI actually put an output in addition to the picture, let's say, actually then list the components of its training that it used in order to make that output?
That's a very active area of research, and that's what is explainability of AI. So right now, the model that I showed you, it's an opaque model, right? We don't know how we are getting the output, especially when it gets to be very complex. So people say, well, I can't rely on it. How many people's model do you rely on? You ask the same question to a scientist and tell them exactly how they got that, they can't do it themselves, right? So it's not the same thing. The problem we want to know that is because I can reproduce that very quickly. So, but this is a very active area of research. We don't have very good answers for complicated models.
This is terrific. I have never heard of any proposed use of artificial intelligence in the area where it is most seriously lacking. Has it been applied to legislation?
Good, I don't know if I can improve upon that. Not to my knowledge, yeah. But we'll benefit from it for sure. Yeah. The first patent code of 1790 was 6 pages. Now you can imagine it's hundreds and hundreds of pages. Why is that? No, I don't think AI would form lobbying groups, so that'd be a rational thing.
But it has affected the employees in the community per se, right?
Absolutely.
So to do the research now,
Yes.
you don't need as many staff to help.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
I have a question from the virtual audience. What are the consequences when we allow AI to operate our military weapons? For example, AI-operated submarines with nuclear warhead, space equipment that's similar. Who is responsible for the mishaps?
I think that's a legal question.
That's a bit beyond my expertise, but we could sort of talk as a community. I don't know who would be responsible. I think that when leaders make mistakes, accountability is something that is always discussed. What I will say is that I caution against a fearfulness of new technologies, right? We've seen this before in so many instances. And when a new technology comes along, that we worry, and it's understandable. But I think the human capacity to adapt and use it for good has been there. There's always going to be outliers. There's always going to be outliers. This is why you have scientific norms. This is why you have laws, and outliers tend to be ostracized. I don't think there's anything we could do about that. When the Supreme Court held that life is patentable, which gave rise to the biotechnology industry in a case called Chaudhary, there was a dissent in that case that said this is going to give rise to a parade of horribles, that you're going to have scientists creating all sorts of things that are going to be awful for humanity. And instead, we have an extraordinary biotech industry that has taken off, that has given us life-saving treatments. And those scientists who are outliers, nobody really knows about them or cares about them, because most scientists focus more on things that are good for humanity than not. So my general sense, this is not a direct answer, my general sense is that we should just think about how this could benefit us and have some confidence in history that new technologies, while disruptive in many ways and new jobs are lost, etc., there's a good behind that, and the law always catches up to it.
I may need to be corrected here, but I think I read somewhere that at least one court in the United States has held, or maybe it's the department in charge of copyrights, that AI generated material can't be copyrighted because they are not from a citizen or an entity that's recognized as somebody that can hold copyright. Is that correct? And do you think that's sustainable?
So, no, you're right. So the Copyright Office and the courts have held that AI cannot be an inventor or an author because it's not human. And I tend to disagree with that. I don't disagree that AI isn't human. I disagree. I just think the focus is wrong, is that we should focus more on the end product. If an AI came up with something that is particularly beneficial to treating a chronic disease, for instance, are we not going to grant a patent because the AI is not human? Maybe, but then is the next person who's behind that AI, next human, going to invest the resources in inventing? That's the problem. So I think it's misguided. I have colleagues who disagree with me. And that too is sort of open to debate. But you did give an accurate representation of the law. It's really focused on who's.
I can give another example. So matrix multiplication, scientific. An algorithm to do matrix multiplication was recently improved by AI, and matrix multiplication has been done for centuries. And this improved by quite a bit, and it impacts almost every scientific domain. Can that be patented or not? I mean, it's an immense contribution to humanity by AI itself.
Video games too.
Oh, that particular one has
Wait,
a
wait,
benefit
wait
of
for the mic.
saving
Would
energy.
you wait for the mic because the audience at home can't hear? Do I need that?
AI does not like seniors. And I would appreciate if you have some idea how seniors can navigate the healthcare system. My seniors that I have talked, senior friends I've talked to, we are absolutely, my senior friends that we've had discussions, we are absolutely bewildered by AI. So any ideas that you may have that we can navigate this healthcare system, I would appreciate.
Yeah, healthcare, billing, appointments, those are hard. But it can certainly help you to interface with a lot of information. Now you can talk to Google, for example, or any of these interfaces and get answers.
What if one doesn't have a computer?
You have devices
You have
now.
a phone.
Phone will do everything. You don't need a computer. It's phone which will do everything.
I'm talking about the phone.
If you don't have, yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, you need some infrastructure to be able to do that.
That's a good question.
Do you have any ideas?
You know, I'm very sympathetic because my mother, my 91-year-old mother, has a phone, but I get called every day from her. She doesn't appreciate this is really a computer, and she just needs to get on Facebook. That's all she wants to do, and so for her to navigate it, she'll call me every day with a problem about her phone unrelated to healthcare. When it comes to healthcare, how I help her, it's a human input at that particular point, frankly.
Yeah.
I go to her apartment, I sit down with her, we do the paperwork, I call the doctors. I think that's where we are. I think it's a generational issue. It's a problem, particularly with these types of technologies.
That's very true. And on that bit of wisdom here, I have a few announcements. Our next forum will be the first Sunday of October 1, which happens to be the day before the Supreme Court opens. The topic for our forum that day, on Sunday, will be, does the Supreme Court have credibility?
No.
The speakers include Cassandra Burke Robertson, a law professor and the director of the Center for Professional Ethics at the Case Western Reserve School of Law, and Stephen Chien, an assistant professor of law at Cleveland State University's Law School. We're still stirring the pot, as my grandmother would say. You are welcome to attend our 10:15 service upstairs in the sanctuary or via our YouTube page, uucleveland.org. Instead of our regular minister, we'll have several speakers discussing their reflections on the recently held Unitarian General Assembly in Pittsburgh. Musically, we'll have an Andante movement from Tchaikovsky's String Quartet No. 1. I don't think AI could do that. We'll also have a song written by Holly Neer, a peace activist singer, and one of the founders of the women's music movement. I think it was in the 1980s. We'll end our service with an original piano composition, Alamande, composed by our own Unitarian pianist, Karen Tooley. This form has been recorded and will be available, probably if not today, by tomorrow, at our website, on our YouTube part of that, at uucleveland.org. And I want to thank you personally for our speakers, especially for joining us, and for you, the audience, who have asked such good questions. On October 1st.